I'm Sarah Colvin, and today we are here at the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension Field Office in Barnstable with Larry Dapsis, entomologist with the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension. Larry, thank you so much, and thank you so much for bringing us here to your office.
Great. Nice to see you again as usual, Sarah.
So we are, of course, talking about ticks, a big topic here on Cape Cod. Certainly lots of ticks here, and there are, I now hear, 5 tick-borne illnesses that can affect people.
Yeah, one wasn't a magic number. So then there was babesiosis, anaplasmosis, and then more recently, Borrelia miyamotoi, relapsing fever, and now with the emergence of Powassan, or at least the detection that has probably been here for a long time, it's just flown under the radar screen.
Sure. So where do these illnesses come from? How do the ticks become carriers of them in the first place?
The ticks have a relationship with these pathogens through a number of what we call reservoir hosts. So in the case of Lyme disease, that bacteria resides in mice, chipmunks, rats, some species of birds. So it's kind of like microbial ping pong. The ticks are getting infected and then reinfecting the animal community. So it goes back and forth. We just kind of get caught in the middle. We're collateral damage.
Sure. So Powassan is the latest virus to come out. Been kind of tracking it since 2013. What can you tell me about Powassan and the dangers of this particular disease?
Sure. Powassan isn't so much what as it is a place. Powassan is a town in Ontario, and Powassan disease triggered by this virus was described back in 1958. So for a number of years, most of the cases were confined to the upper central Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota. But then it did pop up on the East Coast, but we think it may have been here all along. And it was ramping up in eastern New York, and I'd been looking over my left shoulder for several years now, wondering when and if it's going to be here. And it was brought to our attention last fall from Mass Department of Public Health. In the past 2 years, we've had 9 cases confirmed in Massachusetts, including Barnstable County.
Wow. And what are the symptoms of this? And I'm looking at the surveillance there, and certainly Falmouth, Barnstable, Dennis, Brewster, Orleans. So really, this is all over the Cape. But what are the symptoms that people are displaying with this illness?
There's a number of symptoms, but we kind of look at this right now through the lens of West Nile virus. Apparently, a number of people can be exposed and be completely asymptomatic. But in the rare instances where it goes what's called a neuroinvasive route, typical clinical presentations are encephalitis and meningitis, so swelling of the brain and spinal tissues. And at that point, it will land you in the hospital. And the bad news is that it's about fatal in 10% of the cases, and those that survive it typically have long-term neurological damage.
Wow.
So when we heard about the cases, including being on the Cape, I work very closely with the Laboratory of Medical Zoology at UMass Amherst, Steve Rich's group. So we talked late last fall about maybe we ought to look for this pathogen. And fortunately, this group they were working a year ahead of time on developing a test to look for Powassan. And so we were at the right place in the right time. So we launched a surveillance project this spring. And what we did was we collected ticks from Falmouth all the way out to Truro. So 6 sites. And the lab analyzed about 600 plus ticks. So
wow.
It's robust sampling because it's tedious work. And what we found was that we had positive hits of Powassan at 4 out of the 6 sites. So while we thought we were looking for a needle in a haystack, we found 4 needles in the haystacks. And the rates of infection range from 2.5% in Orleans upwards of almost 10.5% in Truro. So there are tick populations packing a lot of this particular pathogen.
So that certainly says that it is here, and it is definitely a threat.
Well, if you look at the geographic distribution of Falmouth out to Truro, the animal reservoir for this virus are mice, skunks, possums, and raccoons, animals that don't move large distances in a short period of time. So when I was talking with my ecologist friend in New York, Rich Ostfeld, who literally wrote a book on this ecosystem. I mean, he is the grand master. And we were chatting about our data, and he said this suggests that this could have been here for 1,000, 10,000. And as a theoretical ecologist, you can toss out numbers like 50,000 years pretty casually.
Of course, theoretically.
With authority.
Indeed. So really, I mean, what does this say? Does this say to you as an entomologist that there's more work that needs to be done, more studying that needs to be done? Could it be that there are more than these 5 diseases that the ticks are carrying?
That's a great question, because 5 diseases doesn't stop because you have 5 fingers on your hand. I mean, if you look at what's inside of a tick, they are literally little cesspools of microbes. So are some of them in there in causing health issues that people don't understand? Highly possible. So a lot more work does need to be done. But basically for us moving forward, what we are proposing to do is expand our surveillance to really get a detailed map of where this is and how it potentially varies from year to year. So it's definitely on our radar screen as something we want to learn a lot more about.
Sure. What else have you learned in your research of these ticks?
The array of infections with these other pathogens, and what's really important is that it's not just about Lyme anymore. That's the headline. And what we have found in 5 years of work with Steve Rich's lab is that we're seeing rates of co-infection upwards of 8% of the ticks in the nymph stage ticks, which is key because that nymph stage is responsible for 85% of all tick-borne diseases. Those are the ones that are active during the summer months, that are basically, we call it the size of a poppy seed. But if you look closely at these, that bears out the problem.
That's amazing how tiny these little things are, and this is what's responsible for, you said 85% of the infections. Mm-hmm. And when you say co-infected, so you could have a tick that has Lyme and Powassan, or Lyme and something else, or Powassan and something else.
Sure. The co-infections we were studying involve Lyme plus Babesia, Lyme plus Anaplasma, and you can get more than one of these diseases at the same time, which compounds the difficulty of proper diagnosis, which brings the importance of tick testing right to the forefront. With the generous support of Cape Cod Healthcare, we received a grant this year to subsidize tick testing through the Laboratory of Medical Zoology. And what this effectively does is that normally a full panel test is $50.
Wow.
With this subsidy for Cape Cod residents until we run the money out, it'll be a $15 test. And so for the price of a pizza, you can find out hard data of what you were potentially exposed to. And when we look at these various reports that people receive, there's a number of cases where it's, co-infection, which now a person with a tick bite that's not feeling good can now go into the doctor's office and say, hey, I was exposed to this, but I was also exposed to this. And so the reason Cape Cod Healthcare took such an interest in this is that it looks like a very good tool for helping the medical community hone in on a complete and accurate diagnosis.
And this tick test program we're talking about is when you get bit by a tick.
Correct.
The last thing you want to do is flush it or throw it away. You want to send it in to get tested, because that's really one of the best ways you can find out what's going to happen to you.
The marketing banner that's on this is "Send a Tick to College."
I love it. A little cheaper than college tuition for your teenagers, say.
Just slightly.
But send a tick to college. So how long does it take to get the results back? And how successful has this program been so far?
That's the beauty of this. Unlike the human blood tests for these diseases, particularly Lyme, This is spot on accurate. This is 99.9% accurate. If it says it is, it is. If it says it's not, no. And when they receive the tick, people will get their test results back in 3 to 5 business days. So very, very fast turnaround. I mean, this is an elite lab we have the opportunity to work with.
So say I'm out running around in the woods, riding my bike, whatever. I come home and I see a tick on my arm, on my leg. How do I get it from out of my leg into the mail and send it to Tick College?
You want to use the proper removal tool if it's attached. So
Okay.
pointy tweezers, that is the tool of the day, not all the other old wives' tales things. And it's easy. It's a matter of putting the tick in a vial or a little Ziploc plastic sandwich bag. You don't have to put it in alcohol or preserve it. That tick can be dried out and dead for 50 years and they can still test for it. And it's a matter of going to their website, tickreport.com. So there's an online submission process that's not only easy to navigate, but they also have a chat function that if you run into a little bump, they are there to help you.
So what does the tick population look like on Cape Cod these days? Is it grown? Is it smaller? I mean, what are we seeing in terms of numbers?
In our 5 years of work on tick density, it varies year to year, but it's not doing one of these things. And the reason for that is that the tick population itself is really regulated by the available animal hosts that it has a chance to feed on. So that pretty much kind of dictates how big the population is going to be.
Great. And so, in terms of let's talk about what people can do to protect themselves, because obviously
Absolutely.
we like to be out, we like our outdoors here on Cape Cod. There's plenty of walking trails, lots of woods. Maybe first we'll talk about where you're most likely to encounter a tick. So are there hotspots, or is there a certain kind of nature way, like woods, say, more likely than the beach?
Let's look out in our backyard.
I think there's a lot of ticks out there.
Most people associate tick prevention with going into like a state park, and there's certainly ticks in these, nice wooded parks that we have here on the Cape. But there was a very interesting research study out of the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station. They determined that 80+% of tick bites people were getting were from working in the edges of their own yard.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's the last place you really think about being super protective. I mean, I think about, walking my dogs in the morning with my slippers and, bathrobe on and not thinking about ticks that could be lurking around the edges of the yard.
Absolutely. So that it basically, the powassan and these other things just reinforces the 3-point mantra, the 3 Ps, I call it. Protect yourself, protect your yard, and protect your pets. So under protecting yourself, certainly the tick checks, proper removal, save the tick. But what I have found 5 years ago in doing research with repellent products is that treating clothing with products that contain the active ingredient permethrin, that is the most effective tool in the box, hands down.
Sure, and this, you spray it right on your clothes, right, and you can wash the clothes. It'll last through 6 washes or so.
6 washings, but treating footwear is absolutely mission critical because these nymph stage ticks, they are down in the leaf litter. The first place they attach to are your shoes. And so treating shoes is just it makes sense as a first line defense. I treat my footwear probably every 3 or 4 weeks.
Now, are there times of the year where there are more nymph stage ticks than others? Is there kind of a natural life cycle to them, or are we finding nymph stage ticks 365 days a year?
No, the nymph stage pretty much are May to about now, but the other stages that can transmit the adult stage ticks, they're active from September into April. So the risk of getting a tick bite is really year round. Anytime, even in the winter, you get temperatures above freezing and breaking snow cover, you can have tick bites. And we see that in the literature or the data from DPH that there are cases of Lyme disease in January all the way through December. But 85% of it's in that summer months when that stage is active.
So is there anything that can be done to reduce the tick population?
The 5-year study we had was an attempt to do just that. we were using what was called the four-poster system, basically baiting deer to come in to feed on whole kernel corn, get treated with permethrin on their neck and chin, and kill the ticks before they had a chance to feed. And what we found in our work is that we reduced the tick populations after 5 years by about 8.5%.
Not a lot.
Not remotely a lot, and it's expensive. And what we discovered about this whole ecosystem on the Cape in particular is that until we put out surveillance cameras like this,
Oh.
that can take pictures in the dark as well as during the day, and they're motion activated, we captured about 400,000 frames of image. And what we found on the Cape is that we didn't feed any deer.
Really?
There's so many acorns and alternate forage sources. What I found in the photography is that I fed 30,000 pounds of whole kernel corn to raccoons. And they're very unhappy that the project is done.
I'm sure they are. And so something like a rabies baiting program, which deals with the raccoons and the skunks and things like that, who are, I think, more scavengers, right, than a deer would be, that would be more effective, but can't really create a program like that for the deer.
Sure. I mean, we thought about if we know we can attract raccoons to these stations, maybe that's a place you can deploy these, vaccinated baits for rabies.
Sure.
But the four posters, it's Fish and Wildlife as a state agency is not fond of us feeding deer anyway.
Exactly.
And like I said, it's expensive technology. So basically, we, instead of a community-wide approach to reducing tick populations, there are some other potential ways that can be done that are still being researched. But protecting yourself, protecting your yard with like a perimeter yard spray, not the lawn itself, but the edges, and protecting your pets. That is what we know firsthand now is what the game plan should be.
Sure. So protecting pets, you can't really spray them with permethrin, right? So what do you want to do to protect your pets?
There's plenty of over-the-counter products that are quite effective. Canine Advantix 2, the topicals like Frontline. Permethrin, cats are very sensitive to it, so you don't use those products, but there are alternatives. There's a newer product out now from Bayer called a Seresto collar. And once you put that on your animal, instead of like a monthly application of the topicals, you get 8 months of continuous flea and tick control. And so I've talked with a number of people that have swapped over to the product, and with the exception of maybe 2 people, everybody's pretty happy with it.
Great. So, I mean, I guess there's so many things going on with ticks. I think human safety is super critical, especially as we're dealing with 5 different diseases, the new one, Powassan. So, I think we should remind people again, if they do get bitten by a tick, what is the best thing for them to do?
Remove the tick properly, save the tick, think about sending it to college, like we talked about, see what you were potentially exposed to. Apply antiseptic to the point of attachment so you don't, because you could just get a nasty infection, not Lyme, but there's so many other bacteria that they carry. And be vigilant. Be vigilant that even if it's February, what I tell people is that you really have to think about this as hand-to-hand combat because you don't want to lose a single fight. But once you get into the habit of treating your footwear, the tick checks, knowing that you have a resource like the Laboratory of Medical Zoology at your disposal, I think that provides a peace of mind, or should.
Wonderful.
And plus, that phone is always ready to take a call.
So what's the number people should call?
508-375-6642. We're always open for business.
Excellent. Larry, thank you so much for letting us into your office and talking ticks with us once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Larry Dapps is, of course, entomologist with the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension. I'm Sarah Colvin.